The moment they dumped me in the middle of the Caligo Desert, I knew it wasn't a mistake. They wanted me to die slow, sunbaked, thirsty, forgotten. No water, no gear, no shade. Just 90 kilometers of open death between me and the nearest safe house. The cartel lieutenant leaned over me with a grin too wide for his face. "You special, yeah?" he sneered, kicking sand at my knees. "Special forces, always so brave. Let's see how brave you are in 3 days." He thought the desert would finish me, that I'd beg for mercy or crawl back to his compound with cracked lips and blistered hands. But I wasn't raised to beg, and I sure as hell wasn't built to crawl. They took everything: my carbine, my comms, my GPS, left me zip-tied at the wrists and kneeling in the sand like a discarded package. But I still had the most important tool of all, my mind. And my training. Delta selection didn't just teach me to shoot or breach doors. It taught me how to think when the world went black. How to breathe when the air itself turns on you. My name's Raine Delano. Staff Sergeant, 1st Operational Detachment, Delta. And they picked the wrong woman to strand. I waited until the truck disappeared behind a rise. Then I dislocated my thumb with a quick twist and slipped the zip tie. Pain flashed like lightning, but it was clean pain. Controlled. I popped the joint back into place and stood slowly, scanning the desert with trained eyes. To most, it looked like a death trap. Sand. Scrub. Heat rising off the ground like smoke. But I didn't see emptiness. I saw opportunity. The creosote bushes meant there might be water deeper down. The distant ridges weren't just terrain. They were cover, vantage, and direction. Barrel cacti could be bled for moisture. And the distant cry of a bird told me I wasn't alone out here. Animals mean water. Water means life. And life meant I had a chance. I whispered aloud, to no one but the sun. "You wanted to see what Delta does without gear?" I rolled my shoulders, scanned the horizon, and started walking. "Let's find out." I didn't wander. Wandering kills you in the desert. Every step had to mean something. I moved northeast, toward the compound I'd marked in my head during the 6-hour ride out here. We'd hit rough terrain halfway in, dropped speed to about 30 kilometers per hour. That gave me a good estimate. 90 kilometers, maybe a little more, east of the compound. But I wasn't marching straight there. That would be suicide. The sun was still climbing toward its peak, pushing 117 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe more. That meant one thing: shelter first. Move smart, not fast. I hit a cluster of creosote around 800 meters in. They offered pathetic shade, but they weren't useless. I dropped to one knee, dug shallow pits beneath the roots, and pressed my hands into the cooler sand. Damp, just enough to matter. I pulled off my outer shirt, buried it, and let it soak before wrapping it around me again. Evaporative cooling. Buy myself another hour, maybe 2. Next priority: water. I scanned for animal tracks, jackrabbits, coyotes, anything that needed hydration. Most of them would move at dusk or dawn, but their trails didn't lie. One set headed southeast. Consistent, faint, but fresh. I followed. The desert teaches you patience. Every minute feels like an hour when your throat is dry and your head is buzzing from heat. I hummed quietly to pace my breathing, low and steady. A trick I'd picked up in selection. Prevents panic. Saves moisture. Keeps your body from betraying your mind. An hour later, I hit a rock face that shadowed a narrow ravine. Nestled inside, half concealed behind thorny brush, was a seep. Just a slow trickle down mineral-stained stone, but it might as well have been a fountain. I dropped beside it, pulled my shirt tight to act as a filter, and sipped slowly. Never guzzle. Let your body absorb it. By dusk, I'd fashioned a crude spear from dried mesquite and stone flake. I had water. I had shade. I had a route. But survival wasn't the mission. My team was still out there, captured, maybe already being interrogated. If they broke, the entire operation would collapse. We weren't just there to track fentanyl shipments. We were there to shut down Valenzuela's entire corridor into the States, which meant I had about 60 hours before my team was either dead or used, and I wasn't letting either happen. Night in the Caligo wasn't peaceful. It was a different kind of threat, quieter, colder, just as deadly. The temperature dropped fast after sunset, down to the mid-50s, and without gear, I had to improvise. I lined a shallow pit with warm stones I'd heated during the last hour of sunlight, wrapped myself in the now-dry shirt, and lay low under creosote branches. I slept in bursts, 20 minutes at a time. Enough to reset the brain without falling too deep. I'd learned that during survival week. Never trust comfort in hostile terrain, it's a lie. When I woke for the final time, stars still blazed overhead. I moved before dawn, navigating by constellations I knew as well as the ranges back home in Arizona. Orion to the south, Polaris to my left shoulder. That meant I was still on course. By mid-morning, I'd covered another 20 kilometers, sticking to ridgelines and ravines, avoiding any open terrain that could expose me. I passed 3 fresh snake tracks and a scattering of jackrabbit droppings. Confirmation I was still near a water corridor. More importantly, the terrain had begun to change. The sand grew finer. Hills rose like broken ribs from the earth. I crested one and froze. In the distance, barely a glint in the morning light, was the Valenzuela compound. Concrete walls, watchtowers, satellite dishes. Just like the sad images back in briefing, except now I was looking at it with tired eyes, cracked lips, and zero margin for error. This was what we trained for. The everything's gone wrong, now finish the job anyway moment. They'd think I was dead, either from dehydration or vultures. That mistake would cost them. I pulled back into cover, reviewing what I'd learned during recon. The compound had a single deep well near the center. I'd spotted movement around it last night through my makeshift scope, shadows of men gathering water on a set rotation. That well wasn't just their lifeline. It was their weak point. If I couldn't shoot my way in, I'd have to break them from the inside. I spent the day hidden in a rocky outcrop about a kilometer west of the compound. Too far to make a move, but close enough to study their habits. They had guards on every tower, but they weren't watching the deep desert. Just the roads, the tracks, the obvious routes. They expected vehicles, not ghosts. I took stock of what I had: a sharpened spear, a rock flake edge, strips of shirt reinforced with creosote resin. Not much, unless you knew how to use it. By dusk, I started moving again, sticking to dry arroyos and washes. I passed a stand of barrel cactus and harvested it carefully, bleeding just enough moisture without killing the plant. I'd learned how to do it from my grandfather back in Arizona, years before the army had even looked at my file. Halfway through the night, I reached a patch of devil's thorn, a nasty little desert plant that makes animals sick when they eat too much. I crushed it into a pulp with stone and mixed it with damp sand in a flask I'd carved from a dried gourd. The idea was simple. I wasn't going to fight the compound. I was going to infect it. Their generator-powered well was unguarded at night. Nobody thought someone would poison their only water source in the middle of nowhere. But I didn't need to kill them, just drop them. Gastrointestinal collapse, nausea, fever, dehydration, the same things they thought would kill me. I slipped through their perimeter an hour before dawn, silent and low, moving under the roar of the generator. One guard yawned from a perch overhead, eyes half closed. I tainted the well in under 60 seconds. Then I disappeared back into the dark. By mid-morning, the screams started. By noon, the compound was a nightmare. Cartel fighters staggered out of buildings clutching their stomachs, doubled over, collapsing into the dirt. From my perch on the ridge, I watched guards fall off towers, convulsing. One leaned over the rail and vomited, rifle clattering to the ground. They hadn't seen me. They never would. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about leverage. They'd taken my team. They were probably beating answers out of them right now. But all the rifles in the world wouldn't help the cartel if their men couldn't stand. I moved as the sun reached its apex, slipping through the chaos like a shadow. No one challenged me. Most were too sick to care. Others lay unconscious in the shade, moaning. A few held guns with shaking hands, but couldn't lift them. I used their confusion to reach the main structure, a blocky concrete building with reinforced windows. It screamed command post, and that's where they'd be keeping my team. Inside, it was dark and hot. I moved fast and quiet, checking rooms with nothing but instinct and memory. I'd studied that satellite imagery for hours back in briefing. Now it guided me through the corridors like a map burned into my brain. Third room on the right. Steel door. Padlocked. I knocked once. Silence. Then a voice, ragged, hoarse, answered. Raine? It was Mercer. Sergeant Nate Mercer, my comms guy. Tough, wiry, smart as hell. I snapped the lock with a crowbar I'd scavenged off a supply cart, stepped inside, and found them, my team. Mercer, Reyes, Dalton, Sergeant Lynn. Tired, bloodied, bruised, but alive. Their eyes widened. You're supposed to be dead, Lynn whispered. Yeah, I said. That's the rumor. I handed Mercer a makeshift blade. Time to finish this. Quietly. They moved like wounded wolves, silent, lean, and ready to bite. No one in that team needed a lecture. We'd fought together in Kandahar, in Erbil, in places we still weren't allowed to mention. This time, we fought with stone blades, broken chair legs, and the kind of rage you only earn after watching people laugh while they break your brothers. The compound was still in disarray. I timed it perfectly, mid-symptom surge, full system collapse. We slipped through corridors, disabling anyone still functional. We didn't kill unless we had to. These men weren't soldiers. Just drug runners with good gear and no training. The poisoning had broken their discipline. We did the rest. In the motor pool, I found what I needed, a desert-grade Land Cruiser, fully fueled. Keys still in the dash. I laughed once, just a breath. Load up, I told the team. We're driving north. Mercer looked at me like I was made of smoke. You crossed the Caligo. On foot. I was bored, I said. He chuckled, even through the pain. You're not human, Raine. No, I said, sliding behind the wheel. I'm Delta. We left the compound without a shot fired. Back in Arizona, they told us infiltration without weapons was a statistical impossibility. That crossing open desert without gear was a death sentence. That asymmetric warfare required teams, support, supply. They were wrong. All it took was knowledge. And a refusal to quit. We didn't stop until we saw the lights of the border. It took us 6 hours of driving through sand, dried riverbeds, and old smuggler trails Mercer remembered from a mission 2 years back. By the time we hit the edge of the exclusion zone, our vehicle was coated in dust, the radiator was screaming, and the team looked like extras from a war movie. Border Patrol nearly opened fire on us, until I stepped out with my hands raised and barked our ID code over the roar of the engine. Echo Zulu 91. Delta Extract. For survivors. They rushed forward then, guns down, medics scrambling. I let them take my team first. Lynn was barely upright. Reyes needed in 4 on the spot. Mercer had kept up only through sheer spite. You too, one of the agents said, gesturing at me. I shook my head. Later, I sat on the bumper, head tilted toward the stars. The debriefs came next, days of them. Interrogations without malice. Just endless questions from suits who couldn't believe what they'd read. You crossed 90 kilometers of open desert, one of them said. On foot, without water or equipment. I nodded. You infiltrated a fortified compound. Yes. Disabled the garrison. With natural toxins. Using plants? I didn't flinch. Desert knowledge. Old techniques. A little bit of chemistry. A lot of necessity. They wanted to call it improvised chemical warfare. I corrected them. It was adaptation. Nothing illegal, nothing artificial. Everything I'd used grew within walking distance of the compound. They just didn't know how to see it. That was the real failure. They never saw me coming. Weeks later, I was standing in front of a class instead of crouched behind enemy lines. The patch on my shoulder still said Delta, but my orders had changed. No more direct action. My job now was to teach what had happened in the Caligo, to turn one impossible mission into a roadmap for the next soldier who'd be stripped of their gear and dropped into nowhere. The classroom was a windswept stretch of red rock in southern Nevada, not far from where I first trained. A dozen operators sat in makeshift shade, their faces sun-scorched and skeptical. Rangers, SEALs, JTF-2, men and women with years of war behind their eyes. I held up a dry creosote branch. This is a survival tool, I said. It marks moisture. It's flammable. Its resin is antibacterial. And if you know what you're doing, it can glue a spearhead to a shaft stronger than epoxy. Someone in the back scoffed. You took down a whole cartel with a plant? I smiled tight-lipped. I took them down with knowledge. The plant was just one piece. They started paying attention then. I walked them through the science. Evaporative cooling techniques using desert sand and fabric. Filtering seep water with scavenged cloth. Recognizing animal migration paths to track hidden sources. Creating non-lethal toxins from native flora. What I didn't teach was bravado. There was no room for legend in survival. Just facts, methods, muscle memory. The desert didn't care about your rank. It only cared if you respected it. One British SAS guy raised a hand near the end. How much of what you did was mental versus physical? I shook my head. That's the wrong question. Survival is applied knowledge. Your mind finds the solution. Your body carries it out. Your training makes it repeatable. I let the silence hang. That's how we beat impossible odds. Not with muscle, with method. After the class dismissed, Lieutenant Colonel Brannick found me near the edge of the field, where the desert stretched wide and unbroken. He was one of the few officers I respected without question, served in the Korangal, bled for people who never knew his name. Now he was overseeing survival programs across the Joint Special Operations Command. "You've changed how we do this," he said, nodding toward the students still packing their gear. "This isn't just Delta anymore. The Aussies are teaching your techniques now. So are the Brits. Even the Canadians have a desert course built around what you pulled off in Caligo." I didn't answer right away. I watched the wind shift over the plain. Same air, different continent. "They used to say survival training was about toughness," I said. "Now they're realizing it's about knowledge." Brannick chuckled. "We got the Valenzuela lieutenant," he added. "Picked him up on a follow-up raid. He couldn't stop asking how you survived." I looked at him. "What did you tell him?" Brannick's smile faded. "Didn't have to. He kept saying it wasn't possible. That you weren't human." "He's wrong," I said quietly. "What I did wasn't superhuman. It was fully human. Just trained." He didn't argue. He didn't need to. That's what people don't understand about Delta. We're not born different. We're built different, through fire, failure, and learning how to win when everything goes wrong. The desert didn't make me special. It just revealed what training already forged. 3 months later, I stepped off a transport plane onto cracked earth and brutal heat. Different continent, Southern Africa this time. Different mission, same odds. Intelligence said a militia was holding hostages in the middle of the Karubi Desert. No maps, no roads, no extraction point. Just sand and silence and the knowledge that if things went wrong, it would take days for anyone to find us. It was exactly the kind of mission I was made for. The younger operators looked at me differently now. Not because I was some legend. Because I'd done the thing they all feared, been stripped down to nothing and still brought the team home. One of them, a recon specialist named Baird, asked me what I carried on ops now that I'd been through Caligo. I opened my pack. Showed him a folded mesh shirt, fire cord, a flint blade, 2 feet of creosote resin waxed in canvas, and a hand-carved compass. "Everything else," I told him, "is in here." I tapped my temple. That night, we moved into the desert. Another operation, another ghost trail across hostile land. I wasn't afraid of the heat anymore. I didn't need to be. Because Delta had already taught me the one lesson most operators only learn when it's too late. That no situation is hopeless. That no terrain is unbeatable. And that when you strip away the kit, the tech, and the support, what's left is you. And if you've trained hard enough, long enough, smart enough, you're enough. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.